Well, it's so good to join you today for yet another episode in our Season 3 Senior Flicks video series. It is my distinct honor to be with a friend of mine named Jim Breadner. My name is Rich Janes, and I'm one of the pastors here and the director of our Spiritual Life Department and our Strategic Partnerships. And Jim, thank you for taking the time here in this workshop here at Shepherd Village to meet with us and to share your story. So why don't we begin with that? Tell us a little bit about your early days and where you grew up and some of that journey as a young person.
Right. Well, I was a kind of a misfit. I didn't like sports when I was in preschool and in public school. Didn't particularly like it, but I liked building things and making things and fixing things and helping out in my parents' business, which was insurance. So I had a variety of experience, but nowhere did it provide money in my pocket.
Yep. So you started teaching when you were 18 years old. How did that come about?
Well, I skipped a couple of grades in public school, which isn't the common thing in the city.
Okay.
But in the countryside, if a person finishes all the work from the book for grade 6, then you start grade 7 halfway through the year and you're finished. So it just happened naturally, but it gave me a lot of time to do things I liked, and that's partly boating and fishing and sailing and lots of other individual sports, personal sports.
I mean, at 18, you're not much older than your students.
That's right.
So what was it that sort of inspired you to say, I think I might be good at this?
Well, that's interesting because there's no one in my family, close family, that's in teaching, but I had an uncle, and that uncle was a master at Toronto Teachers College, and he pushed me to go into teaching. I had another mindset to go into ministry as well. And he said, well, take this and you'll learn a lot of good things about teaching, and then you can go on with your ministry. So on that basis.
And that probably was what led you to not just teach, but you also mentioned that you were involved in leading a boys group. How old were those boys at the time?
They were public school and high school age, children's ages. It was called Sigma C, the goal is Christ. It's a verse in Philippians. And that was a good basis for scripture teaching.
So you have been a Christian pretty close to your entire life, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And the teaching of Jesus have shaped you
Yes.
all the way until this moment.
Right.
So Jesus' teachings shaping you, and you as a teacher being put in places of influence or shaping the lives of young people.
That's right.
So what was so rewarding about a career in teaching?
Well, it was good. I had an opportunity to be involved with a lot of different activities, and I would have friends from my classroom, students, and they would come and visit me at the cottage. And this one person was very rambunctious, and every time he came to the cottage, I had a chance to talk to him, but there was one more thing that was broken. So I had a job to do to fix, and then that got me into building cottages and fixing boats.
Wow. So you had a pretty full life as a young person. You're leading this boys group, you're involved in your church, you're teaching grade 5 class, you did that for several years, and then you went to school yourself and you trained in industrial arts.
Yes.
So how did that interest come out? I guess perhaps the woodworking you were doing at the cottage and...
That's right. And I've always liked fixing things and taking them apart and putting them back together again another way. And I guess that came out and gave me an opportunity to do those things. My father was not at all interested in carpentry or building, and his health wasn't good. But so it fell on me, and I had an uncle that was helpful.
Now, we're sitting here in the workshop at Shepherd Gardens, and you're very comfortable in a place like this, I imagine. You've spent hours in rooms like this.
Absolutely, yes.
But here you are teaching children what it would be like to use some of these tools. Now, we've got some fairly modern tools here, but how in the world would you approach the idea of introducing woodcraft and metalwork to a young group of kids in a classroom setting?
Well, one thing is they want to get their graduation at the end of grade 8
Yeah.
or grade 12. And so they wanted to do because I had the list of what they had to do. And one of them was industrial arts. And so I had students boys from many other schools that came to my school. And so they would only stay for an hour and a half in the morning or 2 hours in the afternoon. And so they knew they had to do that, and they had to get past it. And I had standards that I wanted them to accomplish with each of these machines.
So again, you're comfortable in a place like this. You've spent time in a place like this. What does a workshop mean to you personally?
Well, I've built a lot of things. I remember at the cottage, I carried the wood. I carried it from a truck into a barge, and then I put the little wee 5-horse engine on the barge and pushed it out to the island. And then I carried the bricks and the mortar and the wood up to the cottage site.
Yep.
And it was all pleasure. It was just what I enjoyed.
Right. Yeah. Brought you joy and happiness.
Yes.
Getting away from everything else that's going on in life, finding a little bit of peace and contentment. And I suspect that when you come down into this room, the same thing happens here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It takes time,
Sure.
but it's pleasant time.
Yep. Yep. We were walking around the workshop the other day, and you were pointing out a few of the tools, and you were saying to me that certain tools, you wouldn't use them a certain way because of the safety concerns.
Yes.
So let's go back to those classroom days when you were teaching safety in the workshop to students. Why was it so important to you?
Well, it's just the same with everything, technologies and activities. You've got to know what the pitfalls are, and you've got to avoid those pitfalls, or you end up serious injury or death. So, yes, I would tell the group of students all the things they had to do on each device. And a table saw like this one, I didn't allow the grade 7s to use that because the saw blade was so fast and sharp, it could take something away. But a power sander, wouldn't have the kind of serious danger. So it depends on what the device is, and you expect the students to follow exactly the instructions that you give them before they ever use it.
You expect the students to follow, but there's probably moments when that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And you told me a funny story about a student and wearing the safety glasses.
Yes.
I had a good chuckle at that. Maybe you could share that with us today.
Yes. Well, here's the big room, and it's all the tools all around and people working at various places. And one of the boys was working on a lathe, and a lathe makes a bowl like that one, and it goes around, and you have to cut off the excess wood, and then you have to sand it, and then you have to put finish on it. And there were 3 lathes. And so and other activities going on in the classroom around the edge. So I was on one side of the room, and on the other side of the room was a young man who was watching and making a bowl on the lathe. And I looked and I thought, oh no, he hasn't got his goggles on. And goggles are like this, except they're closed right in around the edges.
Right.
So that you don't get dust in there, because if you do get dust or sawdust in your eyes, then you're a hospital visit or something, which we don't want.
Nope.
So I thought, I've got to get over there. So I dropped what I was doing here, and the students, I said, I'll be back in a minute. And I started to head over to the guy at the lathe in the chips that were going up in his face. And just as I started to walk over, he turned off the lathe and put down the tools, and he started walking to me. Now, I knew what I was going to say to him.
Right.
And he knew what he was going to say to me, because we were both had a message.
Yep.
And so we got together, and he said, before I could stop him, he said, can I go to the washroom? And I said, no, you haven't got your goggles on.
Very good. Such a teacher thing to do. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Safety first, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of life lessons in there, and avoiding the pitfalls and following instructions, and
that's right.
Some good ways that you would have influenced students through the years. This workshop, of course, is a cooperative. It works by many people bringing tools, bringing resources, wood and lumber and everything. And in fact, you showed me, it's right behind me,
yes,
that a number of pieces that you brought. You told me a story when you were teaching that you relied on your wife's family to supply some of the resources for the school. So why was that such an important part of how you did your thing as a teacher?
Well, there's several reasons we got Elsa's dad involved. One was he had a lot of beautiful white pine with lots of knots in it. And he had lots of these trees. And he was cutting them to make boards that were going to be used inside a wall.
Okay.
And that wasn't, you wouldn't see it. And I knew he had these knotty pine boards. And I said, I want to make a cabinet in the kitchen, and I need boards. Would you be able to cut me some boards? He said, well, it'll take me 2 years before you can use it.
Wow.
But I can do it. So he went and he cut the 8-foot long boards that are big, round, and he pulled them out with a horse out of the bush, and then he cut them into slices, like slices of bread, and then he let it dry. And then later in that year, he turned the boards half over and turned them the other way, so the sun and the wind got at them another direction.
Yep.
And it was essentially zero cost to me, except I thanked him and gave him some money. And it gives beautiful, beautiful projects.
Yeah.
One of the things that is so beautiful is the pine knots in the pine are small, like pieces, and they're quite clear. And so when you look at it and you put a light bulb in the middle, you see the light streaming through the beautiful grains of the wood. And you can't beat that for beauty.
Yeah. The way you've been talking and describing it clearly shows me your love for woodworking.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've made dozens, hundreds of items and done projects, but you have brought with you today perhaps one of your favorite pieces.
Yes.
And I wanted to make sure that we sort of delved into that. So why don't you just go ahead and pick up this spectacular crokinole board that you have designed. Talk to me a little bit about how this all came together. This is quite something, and I've played on this board with you, so I know it works.
Yes, it does. And these are two different kinds of pine of board. This is mahogany and this is pine. This is not free pine, and the sides are the same material. And this is birch, the pins, and this was made, and I wanted it to be exactly true. That is, each of the boards would be exactly the same distance.
Yeah.
And from any point shooting the puck to get it in the center,
Yep.
you have to have a perfectly balanced board.
Impressive. Hopefully.
It looks
Oh, look at
almost
that.
as nice on the back.
Yeah,
Nice
yeah.
on the back.
Beautiful.
And there's a lot of work with the thickness of the plywood, and then the thickness of the groove in this pine have to be the same so that this sits on a perfectly flat table.
So when it comes to something like this, how many hours would you have put into constructing this?
This one is a special.
Yeah.
I have built them out of one kind of wood, one color with plywood on the very bottom, and I could do this in 3 or 4 days.
Okay, 3 or 4 days.
This way, it would be 3 or 4 weeks.
Got it.
I don't do a lot of work all at once. I enjoy it.
Right, yeah,
So
yep.
I make it stretch out.
Stretch out. Well, thanks for showing us that, Jim. I want to end this first part of our conversation with one final story. I'll take you all the way back to your teaching days in woodwork, and you talked to me about a principal. Principal showed up in your classroom one day, and there was a concern, and you had a concern, and maybe we'll end this first part on this story.
Yes. Well, technology moves along.
Sure does.
And people hopefully get a pleasure of seeing the new stuff and using it. But the principal that I had at this school was very old-fashioned, and he never liked to do anything different. And one of the things that he pestered me with was he made me get up at the board with the chalk and make ovals and make them perfectly round. And he said, the children must do this, and you must show them how to do it, and then you go around and you tell them when their fingers are just right. So we did that. And one day he came into the classroom and he said, where are the writing samples? They're not here. I said, well, we're going to try something different. Down at the corner, and now the corner was Shepherd and Kennedy. There's one store on that corner, and it had a new pen. And he said, don't let the children go to the hardware store and get the new pens. It's going to ruin their handwriting. And so I didn't buy the pencils, the new ballpoint pens, but the kids went and bought them. And it was great, and we had a good time using them. But the principal of the school was not at all happy. And he told me several things that I was doing that were too modern. And industrial arts and lots of everything in our society is changing. And now we don't even have to have a blotch of ink that comes out of the end of a pen and onto the shirt, which was the one that I wore. I wore a shirt and I put a pen in it by mistake. And it had a great big ink blot.
Right. The complaint was in this new technology of this ballpoint pens, right? That it would ruin your shirt. And so there was this caution to beware of new technologies. And so that's where we're going to go in chapter 2 of this story. You're a man ahead of your time in some ways. And we're going to take chapter 2 in a new direction because you embraced new technologies well advance of others. So Jim, thanks for your time today. Sitting here in this workshop here at Shepherd Village. Really appreciate it. Looking forward to hearing part 2 of the story. If you're interested in continuing the story, make sure you click on part 2 of our conversation with Jim Breadner. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.